welcome back to The Art of Making, and a very special welcome to all of you to the very first Industrial Tech Talks, where we'll be talking to trailblazers of the industrial entrepreneurship scene in Europe. To that end, I've invited Felix Wassmann, who is CEO of RESONIKS, a Dutch-based startup specializing in acoustic resonance testing. If acoustic resonance testing doesn't ring any bells like it did with me in the very first time that we talked, Felix, this is what we're gonna talk about today, or one of the things that we're gonna talk about today. Felix, you're a German citizen, right? But
Yeah,
you've decided to found in The Hague. No, I went to The Hague last year. Super nice place. It's the political capital of the Netherlands. It was quite cold. It was December. It's my own fault, of course, not The Hague's fault that I go in December. But The Hague did not really strike me as the Dutch startup capital. There are a couple of other cities that pop up in my mind first, like Amsterdam, maybe Eindhoven for technical or technological startups. So why The Hague?
that's a good question, Maxime, and thanks for having me. Actually, we're two founders. We both have German roots, based in Munich. We both studied at the TU Munich. But after doing our executive MBAs, my co-founder, he went with Intel to Finland. And I had the flexibility to also think about where I want to be for starting my own company. And considering a few factors, it actually, decided to be the Netherlands, The Hague. Actually, it's, as you already mentioned, a super international setting.
Yeah.
Everyone's English speaking. There's a lot of trade going on. It's a really nice talent pool over here. And also from a company perspective, it's very nice to do business in the Netherlands and set up a company here. But it was also a combination of personal reasons, as things often are. I actually did my first bachelor in The Hague in around 2010. So I've known the city. I know the city is by the beach, and I do like to do a little bit of kite surfing as well. So there's these benefits as well. And not everything needs to happen in Amsterdam, right?
That is true. I do like Amsterdam. I like the Netherlands in general. I mean, people who listen regularly know that I'm Belgian, Dutch-speaking Belgian. But like you mentioned, in The Hague specifically as the political capital and legal capital of the Netherlands, I remember that I was there. I was there with a friend who was going into a shop, had to buy something, and then pushed me in first. You're Dutch speaking, you have to talk to the people because they're Dutch. Like, sure, why not? Being a good friend. And then it turns out that nobody in the shop who was working there actually spoke or understood any Dutch. So no, a very international setting, nice city as well, and good to hear that RESONIKS is there to lead the entrepreneurial scene in The Hague. I can also imagine that it's a good region to find talent, right? You're in the middle of the Randstad area, as it's called in the Netherlands, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, Leiden, Delft, a couple of very good universities there.
Absolutely. Where in some cities that are popular among startups, it is getting quite competitive to find good talent. The Netherlands, like The Hague, we're not far away from Rotterdam or Amsterdam. We're actually having a lot of the team come in from Rotterdam. They have good universities there, like the large Erasmus University. There's a few other business universities around it. So from a startup perspective, especially after doing our last financing round, for example, we were looking for talent, and we needed a diverse set of talent, some technical people, some people to help on the business side, on the analytics side, and you really get a lot of good candidates in the Netherlands. And people are very interested in working for startups as well. In general, the Netherlands is a market of early adopters, and people are very open to innovation and to taking risks. And we can also see that in terms of the talent that we can hire. Then, of course, another advantage is that we are actually working from two locations across Europe, so we can kind of duplicate that. And that's been a major success driver for us to be able to find good talent, diverse talent from a culture, but also knowledge perspective, and having them start rather soon. Often our time from hiring until they actually start is less than 30 days, for example. So that's been
Yeah.
immense growth driver for us.
Yeah. Yeah, if anyone goes to your website and looks at the team there, they will notice that's this very, very international group of people here. Is that on purpose?
Absolutely. Like my co-founder and myself, we like to be in that international setting. We've both traveled around quite a lot. I actually haven't lived the majority of my life in Germany. I've lived it outside of Germany. So I've always enjoyed having a diverse team because it makes very interesting and open discussions. There's also some challenges that can come with it. Of course, it can be language barriers and so on. But as long as the whole team has a very open mindset, this can work really well, and everyone in the company really appreciates that diverse setting where we actually have a lot of expats in the team, European experts, even international experts, and most people in our company don't live or work in their home country at the moment, which is kind of cool.
That is super interesting. And good to hear that it's on purpose. You see that a lot that, people hire very local. Doesn't have to be bad per se, of course, but I mean, in my experience, the international aspect is a very interesting one because you you get to see all of these cultures and how people from different backgrounds handle different problems and have different ideas, which is actually very valuable for a startup that has to be creative and has to be flexible in how it works. So let's talk a little bit about Resonics, right? What is so we already said that you're doing acoustic resonance testing. So what exactly is that? And let's maybe start a little bit with the background of Resonics.
Yeah, so as the name kind of gives it away, that it has to do something with resonance. It has to do with acoustics. But where we started is actually quite different to what we're doing right now. So we started RESONIKS in 2022, actually under the brand name Supplies at that point. So Supplies was related to supply chain. We were aiming to optimize something in the supply chain, and it was actually very focused on measuring the volume of something or the fill level of something. Think about dry goods that, for example, you keep in your kitchen, like coffee, protein powders, muesli, also industrial goods like titanium powder, gas cylinders. You can get a lot of benefits by knowing how full they are. For example, you can make sure that you never run out of anything. But the question was that my co-founder and I had, how do we measure what's inside without being invasive and without having a sensor that's in touch with the material? Because that can cause a lot of issues. So my co-founder Fabian, actually being also a talented musician, thought about why not see a vessel like this coffee cup, for example, as a musical instrument, and we ping it and you can hear something. And based on the sound, we can actually tell you exactly how full that cup is, how full that can of coffee is, or how full that gas cylinder is. So that's something that we piloted very early on when we thought about creating this company under the brand name Supplies. And the technology actually worked really well. We were able to translate sound into fill level information. But we also noticed that the market was not just ready for this at that stage. The benefits were a little bit fuzzy sometimes. How much added value do we bring by digitalizing the supply chain? And then at the same time, we realized that we could see very distinct acoustic signatures when some of the canisters we were using had, for example, dents or even cracks. So that was kind of this aha moment for us that we realized we can do more than just fill level estimations. We can actually find structural changes in those canisters. And that's something that was really interesting for us to explore what we can do with that technology. Especially also knowing that in factories, it is actually an issue to find structural defects in metal parts. So
Yeah.
what we did, as we've always kind of done it, we've asked the market to validate or not validate this for us. We pitched it at a conference, for example, and we got a very interested conversation start with nowadays our customers. And they were telling us, well, actually, they've been looking for a solution like this for many years because they're really limited by methods that have been used for a long time that require people to actually perform these tests. And it's becoming harder and harder to find these people. So just to give an example, for example, if you're using ultrasonic testing, you're working with a very high frequency, which means if you're inspecting something like a coffee cup, you actually gotta trace the reader around. You gotta have some gel to have a good contact. It only works on smooth surfaces and so on. And we were saying, well, actually, we can just hit the cup in one place and check the entire integrity of that cup, because we're using lower frequencies, so those disperse in the object more like a sphere, and we can now use AI to actually make sense of that data. So by doing some first validation always with customers, we realized, okay, we can find very fine hairline cracks, we can find very fine pores, inclusions, any kind of internal structural defect with one simple test, where they until now would have had to use multiple tests. So that kind of led to a pivot in the market application for us. We kind of kept the technology the same. We just didn't go for an IoT device and package it small. We went for like a stationary testing system now that we're offering to pilot in the market. So that was kind of how we got to where we are now. Always with the support of our network as well. We've always enjoyed being part of incubator programs, for example, that challenge us and that also have asked along the way, is this the right market? Should you start in a B2C consumer market for coffee, or maybe go more in the industrial setting? Just kind of always asking ourselves, where can we make the most impact?
Yeah. Super. There are a couple of things that I would like to dive in deeper, but let's maybe start with the pivots, right? So many startups at some point will be faced with lack of product market fit, for example, or maybe a technological difficulty that is not really possible to fix right now.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you experience your pivot? What was the most difficult, challenging part there?
I think the main thing is that you shouldn't fall in love with your own product and prototype too early on, because it's most likely going to change. Even when we started the company, we thought, okay, this coffee business could turn into a good business model. I myself also enjoy drinking coffee, and it's my personal issue that I keep running out of my specialty coffee. So there was also that drive to solve it. But in the end, you need to have someone paying for it, and ideally already at a very early prototype or pilot stage. And what we noticed when we basically got to the quality control market is that customers were no longer asking us, like, why are we bringing this to the market? What benefits will it bring? But this was now very clear to our customers and the potential leads we were talking to. So the conversation started being quite differently compared to that fill level solution, where it was us more convincing the market, like, these are the benefits you could have of, for example, knowing how much supplies your customers have, thinking about the benefits of connecting supply and demand, which was a very interesting one, but a very hard one to calculate. So the sales conversations really changed. We start to get that pull effect from customers that people were also talking about, but it was really hard for us also to know that this is what we were looking for until we actually felt it. Because as a startup, as a founder, you are also thinking, okay, I gotta educate the market. So you're not really sure if it's working or not until you maybe try another angle, and then you see, okay, there's much more interest happening on that side. So it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of don't fall into love with your prototype too early. You gotta change it. You might want to pivot the technology or the application, and I think this way you can find the best product market fit. You can find what resembles your ideal customer profile? Who will you want to sell the solution to in the next couple of years?
So don't fall in love with your own idea. This is one of these things that you hear over and over again, and every single time from investors, from people at incubators, accelerators. What was that the hardest thing to let go of?
Actually, I kind of anticipated that we would change things up, so I didn't want to yeah, stay in that mindset to begin with. I actually more enjoyed it as the journey itself, to like really try to figure out what version of this product would it be that actually makes an impact. Not to be honest, I didn't think we were gonna go from coffee to like airplane wings right away. Because this industry is not necessarily where my background is. It's more in finance and sales, but I have a good way of adjusting and learning these things. But for me, the problem of, well, solving my own coffee problem was, of course, closer to what I could use than
Yeah.
this. But on the grand scheme, of course, there's a way bigger impact that we can make by checking these like car chassis, by checking engine parts and airplane things. The impact is much larger, and it doesn't only give me a positive impact because I don't run out of coffee. It can have the potential to bring an impact to everyone, which is really nice. So I think,
Because other people don't run out of coffee because the airplanes are still flying.
yeah, maybe not everyone has the specialty coffee that they like to drink, so they can also just buy one
Yeah,
around the corner. So it's maybe more of a niche problem that I have.
perhaps. No, I also like very, very good coffee, specialty coffee. Did it help that you weren't that far along in the journey before you decided to pivot?
It does, but at that point in time, we thought we were far, and so we already
Okay.
had built like the technology, which meant, for example, like little sensors that we could attach to these containers. We had the software running for it at a very early prototype stage, but still we had kind of built enough to ship 100 of these systems out. And just before we did that, we actually said, like, is this the right
Mm.
approach? It also came with some risks, like whenever you ship a product out, you are taking a risk as a company, especially sending it out to households for piloting can be more challenging than having an
Yeah.
industrial setting where if something does go wrong, you have one contact, you can actually go there and fix it. So we did take the time to really think about uh, would this make sense on the short and long term? And it may have made sense on the short term, but we thought like we need to rethink how we approach this. So that's what we did, kind of take a few steps back, disregard what we had developed at that time. At that time, we thought it was already quite good, but looking back, it was also quite basic. So it was still a right time to make a change.
Yeah, yeah. So you were close to falling in love with it, but
Maybe.
you managed. You managed to step out. You mentioned before, and I thought it was very interesting, that you're translating sound. If I remember correctly, or actually, this is how we got in touch. In one social media post, you were equating science, so the science behind the technology that you're doing, with arts, and then of course you have the acronym ART for acoustic resonance testing, which was very interesting. So how do you see this science with arts, and how does that relate to translating sounds into what exactly?
Yeah, it was really really nice to see how the acronym really fits the art of making from your podcast. And
Also,
there
yeah,
is art in resonance. There are artists who can use vibrations to create pictures. Now, those yeah, show the behavior of sound, but that's not quite the way we do it. What we mean with translating sound is, well, the human can understand sound to a good degree when it comes to talking to each other, of course, and they can also understand sound when it comes to testing parts. Actually, this acoustic resonance test, it's been performed by human operators until now, sometimes also being semi-automated, but a lot of the times it would be a human with a hammer hitting a part, and then based on differences in the sound, be able to say if there's an internal defect. So the method itself is proven. What we're doing is adding that AI element to it to not only automate it, but also to find much more in that data, much like smaller defects, for example. So this is a nice way of really using the potential in AI, because AI can look for many more patterns in the sound files than a human can. And using AI, we can also adapt this technology to work in a more complex environment, like the factory, the setting, and not just like a quiet lab environment. So there's all these abilities of AI to figure out right now if something is good or bad, for example, but in the future also to be able to locate these defects, to identify the type of defect, identify potentially also the type of material, shape of the material. A lot can be done with sound. That's something we know. We're not yet sure how far we can push the algorithm, but our next plan of development actually includes infusing more physics into the algorithm, so that we don't only purely train on data that we also generate ourselves, but to also add more physical parameters to basically create a more generalized algorithm. Right now, for example, each customer use case requires its own algorithm training, but where we want to head in the next couple of years is really having this algorithm that can understand anything just by tapping at it. And the tapping element is really crucial here, because there's a lot of technologies out there that are just listening, and a lot of problems can be solved by just listening. For example, you could hear something crack, but by adding that tapping element, you can actually inspect the part throughout time, and you can find these differences before a crack occurs. So that's where we see a lot of possibilities outside the factory. Once we are there from a development stage, we can also use the same principle and the algorithm we've trained on the factory data to explore applications at, for example, bridges, wind turbines, railway network, maybe even attach it to robots to enable them to do their own kind of inspections. So this is really the huge advantage of AI, to decode resonance and understand all the meanings behind it. Because in the end, if you think about vision and sound, the human likes to rely on vision. It's something we are very used to, but if you actually close your eyes, you can hear a lot of the things that are going on. You might hear someone opening a dishwasher in a different room, for example. You might be able to hear the difference between hot and cold water pouring. There's actually a test you can do if that interests you. So there's a lot of things that you can capture with sound that you can't visually see.
It's interesting. So it's not only the arts part of acoustics as a science, but also the practical use of focusing on one very specific, well, let's call it a sensor, because that's really what it is. Even for a human, it's not really a sensor; it's a biological sensor. That's an interesting view of it, and I think that probably having this kind of one AI serves all approach will be very important for you to be able to scale this up to different verticals, sectors, and industries.
Absolutely. As a deep tech startup, we have a high complexity in our product. Given that also we are not only focusing on the AI element, we realize we need the hardware, we need the vertical integration to actually generate the data to first train all of this. So we have a very integrated product, starting from the sensors with their own PCBs and embedded code, to all the software infrastructure, and a whole testing system that connects all of this, all of that powered by the algorithm. And also there is more in the algorithm than just the pure AI. There's really a very deep understanding of acoustic and physical behavior in there. And that kind of ties back to the great team we have, because we've been able to hire these experts who have a PhD in physics, AI, and acoustics. So this way, we can have a better solution than our competitors, just by having that full understanding. And someone who would purely focus on the software element would not get to where we are at all, because there's just certain elements missing in the market right now.
Yeah. It sounds like a very interesting roadmap still ahead for you guys. One last question, or maybe one penultimate question. I'm very interested to hear your view on, so you being a German citizen working in the Netherlands, having lived outside of Germany for most of your life, perhaps. You have 2 locations in Europe. Europe is getting a lot of negative feedback in the last couple of years as an entrepreneurial location or as a tech location. So what is your opinion on Europe as a tech location, Europe as a startup hub, being someone who is European, who works in Europe, and who hasn't decided, maybe not yet, but hasn't decided to go elsewhere, like many tech startups are doing now?
Yeah, so for the moment, Europe is a great focus for us, because there's a lot of precision manufacturing happening, and there's a lot of critical parts produced, but they're of course not produced in one country only, and there's a lot of constant shifts happening, also for example, due to changes in energy prices, and a lot of elements affect where we produce parts at the moment. But Europe is interesting for us also because there is that demographic change happening. There is an aging population and a skill shortage, so we can have a direct impact, and the market is big enough for us to grow in the near future. But what we should do more is actually see Europe as one market and not stick to just our own country, because that just limits us. Europe still has some challenges for startups that want to have this approach, because we do have a lot of different languages and cultures, and that is simply a bottleneck when talking to these companies. And that's something we can navigate a little bit easier by just having offices in multiple countries and being closer to certain key markets. For example, our office in Tampere in Finland is very close to the Nordic market, also a market full of early adopters. Our office in the Netherlands is close to the Benelux early adopter market, but also very close to the German-speaking market. Compared to Munich, I'm sometimes quicker, for example, at the Hannover Messe in a few weeks from The Hague. So overall, I think we just have to have that mindset that we're not scared about selling to other European countries. And just by reaching out, for example, to networks in these countries, it can open this, and you can basically simultaneously validate that your technology is needed across different industries in our case. So, for example, automotive and aviation, but also needed by different markets and countries. And that helps further validate the product market fit. So in our opinion, that is a good way of showing future investors that there is a potential, and that this potential is not just global. And then we can always still expand outside of Europe. But having also that very integrated product, it's important to have some sort of focus, and especially with topics like certification and so on. That is something that is somewhat standardized across Europe. So that already enables us to have one solution fit for this market.
Yeah. Super. Don't be afraid to reach out across borders and see Europe as one market, even if there are some challenges. European Commission is working on some solutions at the very least, so things are moving, which is positive. Last question. I like to, or I started last time, to ask our guests for a book recommendation or a movie, series, documentary, podcast, etc. recommendation. What is something that you would like to recommend our listeners?
That's a good one. I did think about it, and then I actually completely, yeah. Right now, I'm not sure because I've just been working on our EIC application nonstop for the last couple weeks, and that's kind of the only text I've been able to read. With a toddler at home, it becomes very tricky to find time to read. But something that just comes to my mind now is the mom test. I mean, most of startup founders will have heard about this book anyways. It's not a big book. But I think I would emphasize how important that mindset in that book is, because it's all about validating that the market is there. And that's something that I see in the startup ecosystem is one of the most critical parts, finding your way towards product market fit. And that goes in line with asking customers the right questions. So not just asking them the easy questions, because of course they will tell you they like your product, but really figuring out what they need and why they need it. And if you're not sure what questions you should ask, maybe read that book. That would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. No, it's a great recommendation and a fantastic point to leave this conversation, unfortunately. Felix, thank you so much. What I'm taking away here is that acoustic resonance testing is art in a lot of ways and not just as a type of acronym. Felix, thank you so much.
Likewise, Maxime. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to The Art of Making on the podcast platform of your choice. We're also more than happy to hear from you, so reach out through the EIT Manufacturing website, that is eitmanufacturing.eu, or find us on the usual social media channels. Take care and talk soon.